It is sometime in the middle of the night, somewhere over the Persian Gulf, and the air at 40,000 feet smells like nothing because fighter pilots breathe recycled oxygen and think in checklists. Below them, the Strait of Hormuz narrows to 21 miles at its tightest point, roughly the distance you could drive in 20 minutes on an empty highway. And through that gap moves roughly 1/5 of all the oil the world burns every single day. Two nations have been threatening each other across that water for 4 decades. But this time, someone crosses the line that every president, every general, and every war planner since 1945 has treated as uncrossable. This time, it goes nuclear. Does a nuclear exchange end the regime in Tehran, or does it end the region, the market, and the 80-year-old rule that has kept civilization from finishing what it started? Iran is not a primitive adversary, and anyone who treats it like one is going to be wrong in ways that matter. This is a country of 86 million people, a functioning ballistic missile program, a network of proxy forces stretching from Lebanon through Iraq to Yemen, and nuclear enrichment facilities that were specifically engineered to survive the kind of strikes the United States would throw at them. As of late 2024, the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed Iran was enriching uranium to 60% purity. Weapons grade is 90%. The gap between where Iran sits and where it needs to be is measured in weeks, not years. The Fordo Enrichment Facility, the one buried inside a mountain near the city of Qom, sits roughly 80 meters underground. Deeper than a 20-story building is tall, specifically because Iranian engineers studied what American bunker-busting bombs can reach, and then dug further. Natanz, the larger complex, has thousands of centrifuges spinning continuously. The smell down there, in those tunnels, is the faint chemical sharpness of uranium hexafluoride moving through aluminum pipes in the dark. Iran's doctrine has never been to defeat the United States in a conventional fight. It has always been to make any fight so expensive, so messy, and so regionally destabilizing that the cost of continuing becomes worse than the cost of stopping. The Shahab-3 ballistic missile can reach every American base in the region. The Houthi forces in Yemen have already demonstrated they can close shipping lanes with drone and missile strikes. Hezbollah in Lebanon holds an estimated 150,000 rockets, enough to fire one every 3.5 minutes for an entire year without running dry. Iran does not need to win. It needs to survive long enough for the political will on the other side to collapse. That strategy has worked in various forms for a long time. Now, I want to be straightforward about what this is. This is a thought experiment built from public sources, not a classified briefing. There are gaps in it, and the gaps are real. What follows is the most plausible chain I could build from open information, followed honestly to wherever it leads. Here is where the scenario breaks from history. Iran detonates a nuclear device. Not a test in a remote desert. A demonstration strike. A low-yield device, somewhere between 5 and 15 kilotons, detonated in the Arabian Sea as a warning shot against an approaching American carrier strike group. The device does not sink the carrier. It does not need to. The electromagnetic pulse alone would likely disable unshielded electronics across a radius of dozens of miles. The message is unmistakable. Iran has the weapon. Iran is willing to use it. The question of whether it is a bluff has just been answered. A 15-kiloton detonation is roughly the same yield as the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima in 1945. The United States is now in a situation that no American president has faced since Harry Truman sat at a desk and made the worst, best decision in recorded history. The National Command Authority convenes. The nuclear football is open. Somewhere in the Arabian Sea, an Ohio-class submarine, a vessel longer than 1.5 American football fields, running silent at depth, carrying enough Trident II missiles to end multiple countries, receives a launch authorization. The crew does not debate it. They have trained for this specific moment for their entire careers, and training is designed precisely so that the mind does not have time to catch up with what the hands are doing. The targeting package is built around 3 sites: Fordow, Natanz, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command nodes in Tehran. The weapon selected for Fordow is the B-6112 gravity bomb, delivered by an F-35A from a regional airbase, with a yield dialed to approximately 10 kilotons, lower than Hiroshima, selected to maximize penetrating depth and minimize the fallout footprint above ground. 10 kilotons still produces a fireball. It still produces a pressure wave that travels through rock at speeds no tunnel was designed to absorb. On the Iranian side of that moment, the sequence would likely go like this. Air raid sirens activate in Isfahan, a city of 2 million people, roughly 75 miles from Natanz. The sirens have sounded before, for drills, for Israeli strikes, for regional tensions that never fully resolved. This time, the sound is the same. The consequences are not. In Qom, 90 miles from Fordow, Revolutionary Guard officers receive a seismic report and understand immediately what it means. The word used in their internal communications is not attack. It is the code for a nuclear detonation, a word chosen because it sounds like something else if intercepted. Civilians in the streets of Qom look toward the horizon and see the light before they feel anything. The flash arrives before the sound because light travels faster than pressure, and the human brain is not wired for that sequence. People reach for their children before they understand why. Fordow collapses inward. The centrifuge halls, the cooling systems, the enriched uranium stockpile, not damaged, not disrupted, gone. Above the mountain, a dark column rises, not the cinematic mushroom cloud that Western audiences recognize. At this yield, at this depth, it is something more like an industrial plume that has decided to become a monument. The mountain is still there. What was inside, it is not. Within hours, the proxy network activates. Hezbollah launches a mass barrage into northern Israel. Hundreds of rockets in the first wave. Iron Dome intercepting what it can and letting through what it cannot. And Israel's population centers absorbing strikes for the first time at this scale since the 1973 war. Houthi forces in Yemen simultaneously launch anti-ship missiles at commercial vessels in the Red Sea, not at warships, at container ships, tankers, bulk carriers, the civilian infrastructure of global trade. The insurance market for Arabian sea shipping effectively ceases to function within 48 hours. Iranian ballistic missiles, the ones that survived the initial American strikes, lift off toward American bases in Qatar and Bahrain. Some are intercepted by Patriot batteries. Some are not. Oil prices move in a direction that has no recent historical precedent. Analysts who model commodity markets under conflict scenarios have numbers for a Gulf War, for a regional escalation, for a temporary closure of the strait. They do not have a model that accounts for a nuclear exchange, because no one genuinely believed they would need one. Within 72 hours of the first detonation, Iran deploys naval mines across the strait. The strait goes quiet to commercial traffic. 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply simply stops moving. Container ships reroute around the southern tip of Africa, adding roughly 2 weeks of transit time per voyage, and the cascade moves through global supply chains in ways that take months to fully trace. But here is where it gets complicated, and this is the part that the initial strikes cannot address. The United States has destroyed Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The centrifuges are gone. The enriched stockpile is gone. On a purely military ledger, that is a success. What the strikes cannot destroy is what comes next. The fallout from Fordow, carried by prevailing winds that, in most seasons, blow east and northeast across central Iran, does not stop at the Iranian border. It moves toward Afghanistan, toward Pakistan. A nuclear strike is not a surgical event. It is a weather event that lasts for weeks and crosses lines on maps that do not mean anything to radioactive particles. Every nation in a downwind radius is now managing a public health emergency they did not choose and cannot contain. Russia, which has military advisors embedded in regional operations, and has spent years positioning itself as Iran's institutional partner, does not send troops. It issues a nuclear posture statement within 24 hours that puts American strategic planners on maximum alert and reminds every capital on Earth that there are other arsenals, other doctrines, and other thresholds. China does not intervene militarily. China files emergency diplomatic motions, activates every economic lever it holds over both parties, and begins the process of ensuring that whatever order emerges from this, Beijing shapes it. Every nuclear-armed state on Earth recalculates its doctrine overnight. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, already fragile, already cracking at the edges, does not formally collapse. It simply ceases to function as a norm. Japan holds emergency cabinet sessions. South Korea pulls its ambassador from Washington for consultations. American allies who have sheltered under the nuclear umbrella for 80 years begin asking, out loud, whether that umbrella is still something they want to stand under. The regime in Tehran does not fall. Maduro did not fall when Venezuela was pressured. The Taliban did not fall when Kabul was surrounded. Regimes do not fall from above. They fall from within, and a nuclear strike on Iranian soil is the single most powerful consolidating event the government in Tehran could have asked for. Every Iranian who was ambivalent about the government now has a reason. The martyrdom narrative, which Iranian political culture has sustained for centuries, does not require victory. It requires sacrifice. The rubble of Fordo Mountain is a more powerful recruiting tool than anything the Revolutionary Guard could manufacture. Nuclear deterrence works because everyone believes the weapon will never be used. The doctrine is built entirely on that belief. The moment the weapon is used, deterrence is not strengthened. It is complicated in ways that no war game, no simulation, and no classified briefing has ever fully mapped. The weapon that was designed to prevent the worst war in history may, if used, have just created the conditions for it. The survivors near Fordo would not call it a strike. Language does not work that way. They would call it the day the mountain became fire, because that is what their eyes told them, and the human brain reports what it sees before it reports what it understands. Iranian state media, in the weeks following, would not use the word nuclear in its ordinary sense. It would say the Americans have done what they accused us of planning. It would say, the world saw. It would say, remember, in the souks of Baghdad, in the cafes of Beirut, in the mosques of Karachi, the framing would not be military. It would be moral. A superpower used the weapon. Once, in living memory. The story would not belong to governments or generals. It would belong to the people who watched the sky change color from 100 miles away and could not name what they were seeing. The image that would travel farthest would not be a satellite photograph of the blast site, or a chart of oil prices, or a map of fallout dispersal. It would be a road outside calm, empty, cars abandoned mid-lane, doors hanging open, pointing away from a horizon that is the wrong color for that time of day, in a way that no one who sees the photograph can quite describe, and no one who took the photograph can quite forget. The Strait of Hormuz sits silent, not peaceful. Silent the way a room goes silent after something irreversible is said out loud. When everyone in the room understands that the conversation that comes next will never be the same as the conversation that came before.